Despite all the wonderful background noise, also part of Wild Wine Life, I'm with a wonderful and talented winemaker, Kevin Willenborg. Did I say that correctly?
That'll do it. Kevin Willenborg. Yeah.
From Vina Robles Winery. The thing that I think is really fun about your story is a misspent youth can lead to a wonderful and fruitful career. Can you kind of tell us the story about your fake ID a little bit?
Oh no. Okay. All right. I don't know if this is quite ready for prime time, but when I went away to college, I went to UC Davis. I started studying the wine program there. But I'm underage. In California, you got to be 21 years old, right?
Right.
For purchasing alcohol, for even wine tasting, for that matter. And it's kind of funny starting off college. You know, you're 19 years old and 19, 20, and you're trying to figure out, you know, why can't I taste this stuff? So I devised a plan. I had an older brother, fortunately. He was that age. He was 21 years old. So I had this broad notion. It's like, well, I think I know all the statistics. I'll just go down to the DMV, fill out an application, say I lost my license, and so I did. I wrote down my name, my brother's name, all of the stats except for the height and weight. My brother he weighed a little bit more. He's a little bigger. He was also a little taller than I was. So to make it all valid, the one thing I was worried about is changing the actual height on the application. My brother was 5'10", I was 5'7", so I made a little change there, but put his birth date down. The lady got a printout at the DMV. She was going over all the old data. It was a very busy day in the DMV at the time, fortunately, and as she was comparing the information, I'm going, I wonder if she's going to catch that I shrank. And about that time, I just said, hey, busy day here at the DMV. She said, oh, you should have seen yesterday. Right over. I was a little nervous when they took my thumbprint. I thought, oh, I'm going to get busted sooner or later. But 3 weeks later, I got my license in the mail. It's my brother's name, my picture. It was a bona fide California DMV license.
So a wild misspent youth can lead to something fun, but did you originally start as a wine in the wine program, or did you change majors?
No, math and sciences was more of my nature. And so when I left high school, I went up to UC Davis for the engineering program.
Okay.
And I thought I wanted to be an engineer. I figured that would be a good utilization for my math and science background. But my freshman year in college, a good buddy of mine had transferred to UC Davis as a junior from UC San Diego. And his dad worked for a distributor in San Diego, so he was privy to some wines, and he'd bring some back up post-holidays. He'd have us do wine tastings in the dorms and what have you. And I really enjoyed it. I just thought, wow, this is interesting. Different flavors, different wines, things of that nature. And he encouraged me to take an introductory winemaking class, which you can do at UC Davis. They have a wine program. I would have never thought otherwise. So I did, and changed my major and never looked back.
What was the wine that made you say, was there a wine that made you say, wow, I really want to do this? Or is it just a compilation of all the different wines that you sampled?
It was definitely a compilation of all the different wines that we sampled. The distributor was, they did a lot of Fetzer wine out of Mendocino County. So, from Gewürztraminer to, some things of that nature. I was just, I like some of the other wines that he brought up too, and I just like the diversity of how the different varietals can have such a profound taste, flavor, and even textural profiles. And to me, it was just fascinating. The other thing that was fascinating was when I was growing up as a kid, you know, I used to go to a good buddy in my house, and his family was, they're great people. His siblings were half a generation older, so they were all much older, grown up, and had were in the working lives. And one of his brothers went to UC Cal Berkeley, was an accomplished lawyer, and he'd come around and said, you know, if I had to do things over, I'd like to do something more creative and create something. And that really stuck with me at the point when I decided to make a decision of going into winemaking rather than engineering. And from that perspective, it's been never boring, because it is very creative. I'm still able to use a lot of my, you know, science, a little bit of the math now, what I remember. But just applying the sciences more towards nature, into the soils, to the vines, and what's going on in the wines and the chemistry. That was very intriguing to me, as well as how Mother Nature throws you curveballs every year on how the grapes are grown and the end product, how it turns out, and then the winemaking itself, what the resulting wine is. So there's all these challenges of not just what you know, but also having to react to different conditions, and it just keeps you on your toes every year. You're always learning, and every product we do every year is different one year to another, and that's fascinating.
Would you say that it's, I mean, a big part of it, I was told, in winemaking, it's organic chemistry, but it's life sciences in general, because you're out in the vineyards working with the grapes. You're treating the soils as something that it is, which is something that's organic. You're dealing with the weather. And then you also have a big part of it is geology. It's funny that people don't realize how much of the geology comes into play, or the weather systems, whether it's the El Nino, El Nina, or just prevailing winds in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, you're right. There's a lot of elements to it, and just the, you know, you start off learning some of the chemistry behind some of these things, maybe in the fermentation process, and maybe in the plant development, and a little bit of soils and how things grow and how things photosynthesize, and what causes these sorts of things, and how you can kind of work with these things to make adjustments. But the more you get into it, you really start digging deeper into the different soil types. You start to understand, going beyond the chemistry. You start looking at, there's different root stocks that we plant the varieties onto. Most of the varieties that we grow today are vinifera varieties, which most of them came from Europe. We put them in the ground just directly. They're cuttings. They may have difficulty in our soils. There may be pests that chew on them, and they don't grow very well. So we graft all of these cuttings onto Native American rootstocks, which are more hardy and can sustain some of the pests in our soils. Even in Europe, they use Native American rootstocks on some of the cuttings, such as Cabernet Sauvignon and some of the other varieties. They're just much more hardy. But just learning about them, and there's different types of rootstocks, and if your soil's more limiting, you may want a more vigorous rootstock. If your soils are more vigorous, you may want a devigorating rootstock. So you start to learn these things as you go on. You don't know them all at once, but you start to. And then, you know, the varieties themselves. We know the varieties: Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Pinot Noir, Zinfandel. They're all different red varieties. There's white varieties: Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Viognier, things of that nature. We know these as varieties, but when you start to dive down more, as you get into the, I'm not sure many people are aware, there's different clones of Cabernet and Pinot Noir. There's you know, 20, 30 clones that are prevalently planted of Cabernet Sauvignon. there's that amount and even more of Pinot Noir, say for example, of different clonal material. It's the same variety, the same similar DNA, yet different variation.
Evolution. But I mean, I remember when they were planting Chardonnay up in Oregon, they found that they actually went with the Dijon clone because they felt that the evolution of Chardonnay, that the Chardonnay from California had acclimated over the years too much to the California climate. You think that we'll see more and more of that within the Paso Robles versus Napa Cab 20, 30, 50 years from now, that you'll see more distinct differences in the evolution of those Cabernet blocks? They may have started with the same clone, but they're definitely going to evolve and mutate very differently.
Yeah, you bring up a couple good points. I mean, there's always mutations that occur over time, with the clones. But generally speaking, clonal material, if you have it, if you get it certified, they do keep it pretty intact and pure. You could have variation out in the vineyard with if you take cuttings from a field and then you transcribe it to another vineyard planting. Invariably over time, one of the cuttings could mutate, and you can actually have a different clone.
Oh, right. So that's how.
So that can actually happen. But then you were also talking about, there are different clones. Many of the clones that were initially planted in California, and Carl Wente was one of the pioneers in bringing from Europe and propagating some Chardonnay clones. Some of those were widely planted in California, and then there were others that were added from places like UC Davis, where would propagate through nurseries, and started many of the California plantings of Chardonnay. It wasn't until recently in the 80s and 90s where people started looking towards importing more back from France some specific certified clones called on-top clones that they perpetuated in Europe and had been selected and reintegrating them back into new plantings, whether they be in California or Oregon. It's just that Oregon probably got many of their plantings started a little later than some of the original California planting. So about that time, they had the availability to bring French clones into Oregon and start to play with them and see how they like them compared to the already existing clones where they were doing in California. And so it's not that I'm not sure it's that the California clones weren't suited for Oregon. It's just that the clones coming in from on top, the new clones may have had slightly different characters that they preferred in Oregon, and they found to be a little bit more suitable.
A little bit more of a scientific selection between the time they were brought over in the 1880s versus the 1990s.
In the 1980s, 1990s, those years when there were starting to be, there was this renaissance of clonal material that was starting to kind of work its way through France. But a lot of this stuff had to, they have to go through quarantine to make sure we're not bringing in other viruses from other countries. So the migration of some of these clones in the United States had been somewhat slow, and it took many years now. But now things have, we have many clones here in the United States available in California that from the nurseries, many things to choose from that have worked their way through the system, worked their way through quarantine, and are more readily available. And so there are many different options in your plantings today.
Now, can we start with your Sauvignon Blanc?
Sure.
Let's do this.
Yeah, let's do this. So this is Vina Robles. This is the winemakers, as you know. So This is our Sauvignon Blanc. All of our grapes are estate-grown grapes. We have 6 estate vineyards in the Paso Robles area, and 1 actual vineyard in Monterey County as well. So everything we're tasting today, we actually grow.
So you don't buy any of your fruit.
Correct.
You own it from start to finish.
That's right, and we can have direct input into the vineyard on setting the crop levels, the yields, sun exposure, pruning, any sort of water inputs or lack of to help control the vigor of the vine and get the vine producing the flavors that we want them in the grape that translate into the wine. So we can have a direct impact of the grape quality relating to the wine altogether. This is from one of our vineyards in Paso Robles. It's in the Estrella district of Paso Robles. It's very sandy alluvial soils, well drained. Gets enough warmth during the day to respire those vegetative aspects of the variety of Sauvignon Blanc, the grassier tones sometimes that you can see in the variety. And you get enough ripeness during the growing season in this particular spot where you get some of these nice tropical fruit tones like guava, a little passion fruit, and some grapefruity tones.
You get a hint of grapefruit. I get a lot of, what I like about it is you get a lot of lemon, not the lemongrass, but the lemon flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd mentioned to you, one of the many things I love about your wines is that you don't make Me Too wines.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to buy a California Sauvignon Blanc, I want a California Sauvignon Blanc. I don't want a California Sauvignon Blanc that's trying to be a Me Too New Zealand grapefruit Sauvignon Blanc like some do.
Mm-hmm.
If I want New Zealand, I want to buy New Zealand. And what I like about yours is you have a California Sauvignon Blanc that you go, okay, this is California, this is New World, but you do taste some terroir to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's nice. Now, you were talking about the cooler nights. Is that one of the things that allows the nice acidity to this?
Yeah, that's correct. So it's what I was mentioning. It's a nice warm site during the day, but at nighttime we get that cooling air coming from the ocean about 20 miles away. Comes through a little gap in the San Lucia mountain range that separates us to the ocean called the Templeton Gap, and starts to bring that cool ocean airflow into the region where temperatures cool down to 50 degrees at night often.
Oh, nice.
And help retain some of the crispness in the wine. So that's why we can get these nice crispness, and yeah, we get these rich fruit tones as well, very vibrant.
Wonderful breakfast wine.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Or anytime,
Anytime.
It's the right time.
But I call this a breakfast of champions.
There you go. But yeah, Sauvignon Blanc should be very expressive. And you mentioned one thing, and something I like to see with all of our wines. Terroir is a phenomenon. I think the French coined the term very well. It's the whole kind of accumulation of geology, geography, the climate, the conditions for growing, all together, which makes the uniqueness of site for every when you're growing things. And so when I make wines, I want them. They should express the region that you're making it in. When in Napa Valley, there's a profile that you may get in Bordeaux. You may get a profile in Paso Robles. You may get a slightly different profile. And I think there's even different districts within Paso Robles that have variations, and every vineyard site's even a little different and creates a different terroir experience. But I think the common thread I see in all of our estate vineyards is a very bold, expressive fruit tone. We have a very long growing season in the Paso Robles area. We have the warm days and we have the cool nights, and that just we get the richness and ripeness of the fruit virtually every year. So we get these expressive fruit tones where the full, rich, and ripeness of the grape. And then as we get into reds, also plays a role in the textures, but we can talk about that when we get into that.
Like your Sauvignon Blanc, a good description or an accurate description would be you have the marine sediment of Loire, but you have the cool nights of Robles Bay. So, that's where, if someone says, I get the lemon, I get the grapefruit, that would kind of be a good reason as to why it's something that's very unique as opposed to Napa with, you don't get that marine influence in it where you're not necessarily getting that lemon from the limestone because they don't have all that limestone. It's a different type of profile.
Yeah, it's a lot of elements. A lot has to do with the climate as far as some of the the flavor characteristics. I mean, the soil plays a role in how the vine adapts to that climate and how you're taking it in. So there's so many variables. It's hard. I would hesitate to pin it down to one little thing. But I would suffice to say that just the right combination of warmth in the Paso Robles area during the day, coupled with the marine cooling at nighttime, and the long growing season together is a combination for creating rich, ripe fruit character, and yet enough cooling to retain the nice balance and natural acidity to the wines.
To the Chardonnay. One of the things that I like about your wines is that you don't over oak. You use oak, but it's to accentuate, soften things, round things off, but you don't use it to hide things.
Sure, yeah. And there's certain this now we're getting into a question of style with winemaking. And for most of the white wines we make, I choose not to have any oak influences. I want to keep the vibrancy and the freshness of the fruit characteristics, the varietal fruit characteristics, like in the Sauvignon Blanc. Now, as we get into Chardonnay, the fruit components tend to be more apple in character, and they tie really well to have maybe a little oak influence into the wine. But I think oak has gotten well overused in Chardonnay. So our style is Chardonnay has a nice crisp apple fruit, and I want that to be front forward into the wine. Oak can add a little bit of complexity. Only a minor percentage do we actually barrel ferment. We get a little bit of richness and creaminess on the palate, which is why I like that. But sometimes the temperatures during barrel fermentation can get a little warmer. And you respire a little bit of the vibrancy of that apple fruit character, but you do get some complexity of the oak. So the majority of the wine will ferment in stainless steel, where we can keep the temperatures much cooler, preserve more of that apple fruit. We'll still leave it in contact with the yeast leaves, and when the yeast leaves settle out after a couple months, they'll actually lyse open and kind of leach out more mouthfeel into the wine. And so we'll do that both in the stainless steel portion and the barrel portion. So we still get mouthfeel, but we get that crisp vibrancy, that crisp apple.
Well, you have a nice acidity. I describe your Chardonnay as pineapple and cream, but you don't use that mallow fermentation. So you have a nice crisp acidity that allows it to really contrast with food, and it has a nice weight to it. And it's all a matter of preference. I mean, if there's people who like the oaky buttery Chardonnays, that's fine. But I've pointed out that the biggest award-winning Chardonnays in California, whether you're looking at Montelena or Schaefer, are the ones that do zero mallow, because I remember Bo Baird telling me once that there's no need to put Chardonnay from California through mallow because it all ripens.
Yep.
And you don't get that in Burgundy, and that's why they put their Chardonnay through mallow.
Yeah, no, and I would agree with that. what he's come to the same conclusions I have in that regard. It goes back to terroir. Burgundy gets much higher acid profile in their terroir where they're grown, and in some years the acid profiles can be very, very high acid levels. Sending the wine through malolactic fermentation is a way to soften that acid and bring it into balance. Most the Chardonnay that's grown in California, we typically have a nice balanced acidity by the time we pick it. It's not overly acidic, and so the terroir is different. We don't need to send it through malolactic fermentation to soften the acid. So then it becomes down to a question of style. Do you want that malolactic fermentation as a style consideration? You might get some buttery characters to it and maybe some fatness of the mouth. But we choose to have more of a kind of a crisp, apple-y character from the Chardonnay to kind of come through.
You have a crisp acidity, not a sharp acidity.
Correct.
And that's how I describe your wines. Now, people look at me, and when I'm drinking or describing your Cabernet, I say it's a buttery, creamy cab, and they go, "How can reds be buttery, creamy?" And I tell them, I go, "Reds do go through mallow to make them more approachable."
Correct.
And I don't think. Can you explain to people that reds do go through mallow? You just make yours very soft through other things, through an oak regimen type thing.
Yeah, most red wines do go, as you say, through malolactic fermentation, and you got to remember red wines are fermented on the skin, so we're also picking up tannins and some astringency that you don't typically see in the white wines, and so just the acid profile that would be normally balanced for a white wine in a red wine without malolactic fermentation. It makes the tannins more astringent on the palate, and a bit more grippy and maybe disagreeable. So sending the wine through malolactic fermentation, the lactic acid profile is much softer and makes the tannins a little softer on the palate as well. While we pour the Red 4, here's a question for you. This is one of the big debates, controversial question. Favorite Star Trek captain? Oh my God. So we're talking, so we got a range here between...
Anybody could be Deep Space
Nine. It would have to be William Shatner.
You like the Shat?
As Captain Kirk, I would say. Yeah. He's just classic. I mean, I grew up with William Shatner as the Star Trek captain. There's been other performances. The Jean-Luc Picard is the Star Trek captain.
Now his family owned a winery in Bordeaux, though.
Okay. Yeah.
In the show.
Yeah. Well, see, but that's later after the fact. I mean, growing up as a kid, you just get used to the characters the way they are, and the classic Captain Kirk. I mean, there was a guy who just kind of jumped in, took charge, sheer will that may not have made some of the brightest decisions sometimes, but just had the tenacity and perseverance to make things happen.
A cool middle name like Tiberius.
Yes.
Now, which would be your wine to drink while binge watching Star Trek?
Oh my gosh. That's I haven't really thought about that.
See, I told you it wasn't going to be your typical same wine chat kind of thing. There's going to be a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and these are very controversial.
Well, maybe it's power of suggestion, but now that I'm thinking about it, what we have on the glass right now is our Red 4.
Yeah.
So there's 4 different varietals in our Red 4. I call it a GSM Plus, the plus being Petite Syrah, so GSM being Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre. Very popular Rhone blend. Many people do it, but we add Petite Syrah to it, and that's the plus. So So you know, just thinking about Star Trek and the varied episodes and different planet life and different life forms and variations that you have, that's what comes to mind for those reasons. Because here we have 4 different varietals working together, and you look at the starship, right?
It's all the different.
Yeah, you've got you know, Vulcan working with various humanoid people. You've got, you know, Klingons and all kinds of things. Romulans, and it makes the show work. So here we have many elements making this wine work. But this wine, the Red 4, you get the juiciness from the Syrah. You get that real kind of almost candied cherry from the Grenache. The Petite Syrah adds some dark fruit elements, and the Petite Syrah here from Paso is so soft and simple tannins that it doesn't overpower the wine. It just gives it a little bit of richness on the palate. The Mourvedre, when you smell it, has just has an element of tobacco and a little earthiness that provides some interest to it.
I describe this wine as berries, spice, and chocolate in a glass. That you get that chocolate from the Mourvedre.
Yep.
You get the blueberries from the Petite Syrah, raspberries from your Grenache. They all offer a spice component, and I mean, I also call it a comfort red.
Yeah.
If you want something as a comfort with your pizza, hamburger, or here in St. Louis with your barbecue, this would be your wine.
This would be your everyday, I agree, your everyday table wine. This is one of our softest, approachable tannins of the red wines that we make at Vina Robles. So it pairs with a wide variety of food. You can even just sip this on its own, and the tannins don't build on the palate. Yet there's a lot of complex flavors through here. I think you hit upon quite a few. There are a lot of elements in here. Some you mentioned some of the chocolate tone, but really the fruit tones that come through. There's also some savory elements that come through. A little bit of some smokiness and some of that as well. So it really complements for a lot of things. As you said, from burgers, pizzas, you know, anything you throw in a picnic basket. Just put this in there. It doesn't even have a. You don't even need a corkscrew.
That's what makes it great if you go camping.
Screw cap, just
perfect for deer camp because you know you don't have to take the corkscrew and you can pour it right into your red Solo cup.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and so this is ready to drink. You don't need to think about it. You don't need to age it. Just enjoy it.
So now we're on the cab, which I've called Seduction in a Glass. But here's another question for you. And this is the one that no one has ever had a ready answer for. Are you familiar with Doctor Who?
Who?
Time Lord travels through space and time in a TARDIS. So if you're not familiar with it, here's the question. You have a time machine.
Okay.
So you can go anywhere in time. You can also go anywhere you want. Now, as a wine person, imagine, you know, we get to do verticals. And the fun thing is seeing how it's changed. But imagine having a time machine where you can have a vertical of whatever you want. And because it's a time machine, they all have the same amount of age.
Okay.
What wine would you like to do a vertical of? And you can have as many vintages as you want, but they would all have the same amount of age. What would it be? Where would you like to drink it and who with?
Oh my God, there's so many variables, so many questions.
You could just do the one wine, but I mean, think of it. You could have pre-phylloxera, whatever you wanted, side by side against good, bad vintages, all with however many years of age you would want on it.
Are you talking about like different points in time, like going back to a certain vintage, or?
Yeah, you could collect a 1945 first growth. And pick it up in 1955 and see what it tastes with 10 years of age, side by side, against a 61 that you pick up 10 years later.
Here's what now we're talking blue sky here. So, and I'll throw this out because I'm thinking about it, what ideally would like to be able to do and compare. It'd be great to line up some of these great said vintages in Bordeaux, like 1961, and get some of those wines. Get vintages like that. I think 85 is a good year. There's a couple other years I'd like to get together. Then I'd like to get some California wines, cab, but not made necessarily in 1961 because there weren't as many offerings in California.
41 Inglenook.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, maybe. Well, actually, yeah. Yes. Okay, 61 Inglenook, maybe a 41 Inglenook. There's some martini cabs as well.
Christian Brothers.
And just put them all together in a tasting and a blind tasting. I would love to do something like that.
Side by side with the same
side by side, same amount of age, same criteria, if you would, and of course they'd be made differently, and as they were, but just to get a good juxtaposition and just so you can see the different terroir facets of the different regions.
That would be fun. That would really be fun because you could see what the style was before the influence of California on France was, before they started trying to make things more appealing to the New World.
Yeah.
But at the same point, if you could only do one wine with as many vintages as you wanted, what would it be?
One wine.
Somebody, you get to
one
say
producer.
One producer. Wine. What would it be that you could do as many vintages with the same amount of age? As,
That's not.
Because you've had some of the best wines out there. You look at Petrus and.
The thing is we're raising the bar all the time. Both we're tweaking things in viticulture. We're learning a lot more about the grapevine. We're putting more inputs. We have better tools to work with. We still have a lot of traditional techniques that we employ, but the tools that we're working with keep getting better and better, and we're getting just such what I call a truer representation of the terroir. Just working with things. So. That's a tough one. I love all the different regions in the wine. I can't sort this out to one wine. It's just, it's just too tough.
I tell you, no one's ever had a ready answer for this question.
No,
and as
I like too many varied wines to pin it down to one. I can't do it.
That's okay. See, now, if you've had fun and I'm fortunate enough to either go out and see you in Paso, or we can convince you to come back to St. Louis, maybe we can do this again and you can actually have an answer for me.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a lot of
and
other
I may
questions
not have an answer again. I don't know. This could take a while.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You bet.
I really appreciate it. I love your wines. You can find Vina Robles at your favorite store, your favorite restaurant. If they don't carry it, ask for it. And if they don't bring it in, find a different store or restaurant. That's my recommendation to you. I'm Ray. I'm here with Kevin.
All right. Cheers, buddy.
And here's to living the wild wine life.
And enjoy.